What do you got there?
I'll go suit.
From the store? You capped it? Well, hell, Philip, put it on.
You ain't mad?
Let's understand each other. Stealing's wrong, okay? But if there's something you need bad, and you ain't got the money, then it's okay to take a loaner on the item. It's what you call an exception to the rule. What's wrong?
Nothing.
You don't want to get dressed in front of me, is that it? You're embarrassed because I might see your pecker?
It's puny.
What?
It's puny.
Who told you that? Let me see. Go on, I'll shoot you straight. Hell no, Philip. Good size for a boy your age. Here they come.
Episode 5. I cannot help flirting with an idea that I might have enjoyed the game in its current state more as a movie, non-interactive. Just watching a story of two brothers knock about the country, trying to escape injustice imposed by the society they live in, but also trying to escape their own mistakes. Something like in Steinbeck's book Of Mice and Men, or Clint Eastwood's movie A Perfect World. In the movie, Kevin Costner's character Butch breaks out of prison and takes a young boy Philip as his hostage to help him escape beyond Texas's border. While together, he finds out Philip has no father and lives with his strict, strongly religious mother, and somehow relates Boy's experience to his own crappy childhood. Meanwhile, they are being chased by Texas Ranger Red, played by Clint Eastwood. Remember how I talked about antagonist being the enforcer of conflict, forcing the protagonist's actions? There you go. Clint Eastwood is a great Agent Flores. If you enjoyed Life is Strange 2, I very much recommend A Perfect World. Its writer and director, John Lee Hancock and Clint Eastwood, have a great taste for making characters look perfectly relatable and very much humane. They don't look just made up on writer's page. During the movie, Butch starts acting like a father figure to Philip, and a great bond develops between them. From Wikipedia. Gradually, Philip becomes increasingly aware of his surroundings, and with constant encouragement from Butch, seems to acquire the ability to make independent decisions on what is wrong and right. Butch slowly finds himself drawn into giving Philip the kind of fatherly presence which he himself never had. That brings amazing, touching, and funny scenes, and many very relatable and humanizing moments. For example, when the boy shares his worry that his little peeny weenie is too small and asks Butch for reassurance. In other part, Philip says he never went trick-or-treating for Halloween, and Butch helps him steal a Halloween outfit. Philip questions whether stealing is right, and Butch replies that stealing is wrong, but if you need something and you don't have money to buy it, you can borrow it. Just like in Hank Stamper's gas station in Life is Strange, where Sean can decide to steal camping gear, there is a moral dilemma presented, but unlike in the game, in the movie, the protagonist is confronted with his action by the child, and he's pressed for answers. Also, it has an impact in the future of their adventure. That's why I liked Brothers' adventure in the woods in episode 1, just after Esteban was killed. That's why I was confused when the game skipped ahead in the beginning of episode 2. It seemed that Sean, through trial and error, will become the leader, the adult both brothers sought for. You know, in the sense of the father is gone, grandparents won't do, the mother doesn't care, and Sean discovers through experience and through interactions with Finn's gang and other characters along the way that the adult he was looking for was there all along, within him. This game desperately needed some of that. It needed to firmly establish Sean as the protagonist at some point. It needed to put him, and with him the player, in control. Episode 4 would be that moment in classic narrative structure. The protagonist learned enough about the world to start doing meaningful decisions that shape his destiny. But does this look like a character in control?
So you know what you're gonna do?
No. But let's do it.
Stop! We need up on you.
Don't hit him!
Going forward.
Please!
I think not.
Are we criminals now?
Sean makes the decision to find his brother, but the story is so clumsily told that he doesn't manage to do anything. Triumph sort of falls into his lap. And in the next episode, all adulting responsibilities are shifted onto Karen. That is why I don't really have much to say about this episode. We are caught in the flow of the story, but not in a good way. Not the way I was trying to describe in the introduction to the series. We are being dragged by the current. We are part of a story that is not our own. The illusion of interactivity and influenceability of the story is shattered. We just helplessly watch everything play out. Episode 5 starts with both brothers waking up after a night spent watching stars above Arizonian canyons almost 2 months later. It is a great bonding moment between Sean and Danielle. Honestly, this should have been one of the earliest scenes of the entire game, because during this scene and most of the 5th episode, I could really feel Danielle growing on to me. He seems so carefree, like a great burden was lifted off his back. Finally, he seems like a kid he is supposed to be. But, at least to me, after many negative experiences with him, culminating with his super tantrum at the end of episode 3, that is too late to make me really care. It became kind of frustrating in retrospect because the 5th episode showed me that creators can make Danielle more likable character, but for some reason, they didn't for the entirety of the game, and I feel like that might have been a mistake. Earlier, I mentioned few disgruntled reviews which considered taking care of Danielle a chore. So let me speculate. I suppose the problem these people had is that Danielle is written too realistically. That may sound a little strange, right? But let me explain. While it shows the competence of writers in creating realistic characters, child rearing can be a bit frustrating sometimes. The way you improve players' relationship with Danielle is by the romanticization of his character. For example, if you are showing a romanticized, idealized version of a baby, you don't show it screaming the whole night, refusing to eat, making a mess everywhere with its food, saliva and snot, throwing up on you, more screaming and crying and cooing and pooping. You show him like a little sweet angel who smiles and sleeps. If you are presenting some sort of misfit in a band of hippies, somebody who has vast experience with hard drugs and possibly suffers from a mental illness, say Penny, you don't show him having psychotic episodes with alternating manic and depressive states. You don't show him as unstable and unreliable weirdo, incapable of function in any society, who wakes up at night to pour water to plastic trays to feed alien visitors. And I didn't make this last thing up. You just show him as funny, quirky guy with troubled past. That is what I mean by romanticizing a character. Danielle needed a little bit of that in the beginning of the game. Alternatively, he needed a few scenes to make him grow onto the player, so it wouldn't feel like it's a chore to look after him, because we would understand better that he is a really sweet kid, but has been thrown in a very difficult position. Obviously, some people picked on that straight away, or simply didn't have any problem with it, but I feel that showing Daniel at his best at the beginning of the game, and then progressively going towards his worst at the end of episode 3, would work better than starting the game with him being kind of a stranger, with neutral standing. The flashback you have at the start of episode 3, in which Esteban tells you to be there for your brother because he's just a kid, would serve much better if used as a reminder of how cool Daniel can be, because you would have a direct comparison for his best self from the beginning of the game. Game's argument that you have to take care of him or like him just because he is family falls flat for me. Alright, back to the story. Brothers come back from their trip and we get to explore Karen's community, called Away. I like the atmosphere of this place. It is calm and quiet. Technically too quiet. It doesn't feel like there is any pressure on Sean to run away. Since we are almost at the end of the game, narratively it would make more sense to introduce some sort of impending danger. But yeah, I know, it's gonna come eventually. It comes back to me talking about not having a strong conflict and no antagonist to enforce it. At this point, it is usual for stories to pick up momentum and have everything heading towards the final showdown. Narrative threads get tied in, plot promises get fulfilled, setups get payoffs. Instead, you are stargazing, treasure hunting, building statues. There is no planning for future, like there is no trouble ahead. Compare it to the start of episode 5 in Life is Strange 1, where you get thrown straight into middle of things, or in Before the Storm, where you get right back into the scene and deal with the fallout from the previous episode. But here, Sean is just drinking desert brew and eating pancakes. He's a sitting duck. Everything feels very idyllic, but Sean still doesn't suggest that he can do anything else than run to Mexico. I mean, at this point it is understandable, since he committed quite a few crimes, but you get my point. I've talked about this in episode 3. It is too late to introduce doubt into Sean's character arc now, because we are already on a certain path. Regardless, I like Away and its inhabitants. I would also like to point out that again we see romanticized versions of people living such a lifestyle. Something tells me that people living in the desert wouldn't be as composed as Arthur and Stanley seem to be, and probably would have had quite a few oddities. Observation. I find it notable that they claim that only after moving into the middle of nowhere, they started to feel like they can be themselves, meaning openly gay. Unfortunately this time it is used in a sentence, being gay is still dangerous, the end. This seems a little extreme. I could believe it in case of Lisbeth's religious community in the previous episode, but everywhere in society? I would expect coastline cities of the US to be fairly progressive. Again, I'm not sure how to understand game's message, because it seems like it says you can be openly gay only as an outcast to society. I obviously don't have any real data or life experience of people in the US. Maybe I'm naive, but I would expect the game to portray it differently. Pop culture influences our lives greatly, and I would like to see some hope for gay characters. Maybe that is why it feels so strange, because no gay characters are allowed to live a normal life in a normal society, instead are forced to live like outcasts. In that case, it is a pity Jacob couldn't see this place. I'm sure he would find it quite liberating. But I digress. The more important part is that Daniel is portrayed as a happy, helpful and cheerful kid, sort of without worry. He offers to do a treasure hunt with Sean, which is a really cool moment. Again, a scene which should have been shown earlier, because here it doesn't add anything to the story. But it helps you relate to Daniel. You get a souvenir, and if that happened early in the game, that souvenir could have been used later to remind you good times you had with Daniel and renew your motivation to take care of him in a similar fashion like the flashback before episode 3 did.
Victory! Dance time! Yeah!
You get to chat with Karen some more, which is very fulfilling, because I, just as Daniel, was interested in her character since the beginning. Also, based on the results from episode 4, more than 90% of people playing this game were interested in her as well. But remember Sean's entry to his diary from episode 4? Don't want anything from her. Nada. According to the stats in the game itself, 90% of people don't share that Sean's sentiment. That is crazy. The game showed that Sean got much closer to her. Brothers spent 7 weeks with her. They live with her, she cooks for them, takes care of them, and so on. Sean claims he doesn't know how he feels about her, but just the setting of this episode suggests something completely different. It is not like he has to live there, and since the player had no say in it, I would suggest he was pretty okay with the idea of staying with her. Anyway, next up is the family hiking trip. Again, it feels great. I wonder why the scene took place in the same area as the intro. It feels like circumstantial evidence for my suspicion that maybe the studio was under time pressure or budgetary constraints and didn't have time to model different environments or different parts of the canyon. It is mad that after the success of the first Life is Strange, this would still be an issue. Not that it matters, the canyon looks great and I realize Karen said it is her favorite part. It's just I would like to see more of it, that's it. In the first episode, we got to know that Karen's character exists, that she has left the brothers and disappeared without a trace. In the second, we found that she still cares about the boys and that she has reached out to her parents, asking them to help the brothers if they can. That was partially a source of discord between Sean and Daniel in the third episode, because Daniel wanted to contact her while Sean didn't. Because Daniel kept her letter from episode 2, Jacob was able to contact her in between episodes 3 and 4, and as a result, Sean was able to meet her near Lisbeth's church. Together, they convinced him of the importance of family bonds and he followed them. Between the 4th and 5th episode, Daniel grew close to her and even Sean seemed to thaw a little towards her, only to discover that they have to leave her again, possibly for good. This is a great example of character building and storytelling. Everything seems planned from the very beginning. It is a theme throughout the game, and although we cannot influence the basic beats of the story, when we finally had to say goodbye, the small gesture of hugging her or not feels powerful. And in all honesty, to me, it felt maybe even more satisfying than the showdown at the border. This episode is really character-based, and as much as I like it, I wonder why. Why now before the end? Does this influence anything in regards to the main story? At one point, Sean can offer Karen to leave with them to Mexico, but she refuses. We don't have an option to leave Daniel with her, so I kinda wonder if the team is just exploring Sean's and Karen's relationship and showing that Daniel might be happier here than with Sean, or if there is more to it. Let me know if I'm missing something. Karen tells the boys that police are looking for them in the area, and Sean says they will leave tomorrow. Then Karen gives them flying lanterns, they light them up, Daniel makes them fly around the family for a while, and afterward, they just shut up and let the universe do its thing. Lanterns fly into the night, 2 of them ahead of the 3rd. The next day, back in Hawaii, Karen presents her plan to get called by the police to buy brothers some time to find their way to Puerto Lobos. I find it strange that during the entire game, every adult was so supportive of the Mexico plan, but I'm not about to flog a dead horse. You get to say goodbye to everyone, and there's a little optional piece of dialogue with Karen.
I don't know anything about Mexico. It's scary.
Sean, you're carrying the weight of 2 people on your shoulders now. It's okay to be nervous.
I'm just tired of running. Of causing trouble everywhere we go.
Doubt. This is the doubt I was talking about before, when addressing character arcs in episode 3. But from a narrative standpoint, it is just a little too late to be convincing. It should have been a theme going through the entire game, but if it was, it would cause a ripple effect because it would serve as an admission of fault in Sean's plan, and if he doubts his plan, why not to have some option to abandon it earlier? For that option to be non-viable, you would need an antagonist forcing you to run away. And I have made a full circle to the beginning of this video series. We also get to chat with David for some nostalgia vibe. He gives Sean radio to listen to police frequency. David also states,
"But you think nobody will ever believe you. But the truth is on your side. You and Daniel can't just hide out forever. Is that how you see yourself in 10 years? If you step up and face the law, you can be free. Sooner than later."
I can comment in the same way as in the last scene. Doubt. It seems that authors are really pushing this idea now at the last moment. After all, he could leave Daniel with Karen and continue on his own, but that is not an option. Would it be that crazy to do so? Or to have Daniel say he doesn't want to go with Sean if the conditions were right? The game has mechanisms for Daniel's morality and brotherhood, so it could be utilized in a way that the endings would not differ only in the final animation, but in larger portions of the last episode. This would be the moment. This would be the moment you give up on your original plan and try to figure out something else. But yes, I suppose that would be pretty hard to digest for players. The big showdown ending looks better, but it feels very streamlined. I reckon this idea of doubt just doesn't have the desired effect on me because it is so sudden. For 4 entire episodes I didn't agree with Sean's plan. As a matter of fact, I was vehemently against it. You might have noticed that. In the 5th, I sort of resigned, and only after that, out of a sudden, I start to encounter characters questioning Sean's journey, Sean included. Speaking of which, after saying goodbye, while driving towards the wall, Daniel also starts to raise some legitimate questions. Sean remains pretty positive. In one dialogue option, he suggests sending Daniel back to school in Mexico. That would clearly not be an option since they don't have citizenships. It would be a red flag for Mexican authorities. I have noticed a trend in some of the recent stories. They assume the audience has no attention span, no ability to remember their decisions and trace consequences back to them. Like they forget what happened half an hour ago. That is why setups and payoffs are so close together in this game. Sean starts to doubt his plan not more than 1 hour of playing time before the entire game ends. This push for instant fulfillment of narrative promise feels very unsatisfying. Are some modern authors afraid to lose part of their audience if they stretch fulfillment of a plotline or character arc or setup and payoff further apart? If they make their audience wait for it? Beg for it? It feels like written for someone who cannot pay attention for a longer time, who cannot pause for a minute and take in the world. This is ironic because the game has moments of calm where you do nothing else than sit and take in the world. And also, you have sketching, where you sit and jot the world down. What would I compare it to? Like buying a frozen meal. It is prepared fast, it satiates hunger, but it isn't the best, it isn't fulfilling nor nutritionally optimal. Mostly just fills your stomachs and keeps you alive. Instant gratification. Preparing your own meal from scratch takes time, can be annoying, and definitely gets messier, but the food is better in all of its aspects, and unlike reheating something frozen, it makes you feel good about the accomplishment of making it, especially if you can share it with someone. Or does the audience not care about slow character building and so on? Example. One of my favorite movies is Forrest Gump. At the end, there is a scene where Forrest's son greets school bus driver Dorothy Harris. It's a callback to an earlier scene, but with a twist.
Very well.
Are you coming along?
Mama said not to be taking rides from strangers.
This is a bus to school.
I'm Forrest Gump.
I'm Dorothy Harris.
Well, now we ain't strangers anymore.
You understand this is the bus to the school now, don't you?
Of course, and you were Dorothy Harris, and I'm Forrest Gump.
Do present authors, and authors of Life is Strange 2, think that the relation between the two scenes would be incomprehensible to today's audience? That they would miss the difference between them or couldn't link them together at all? That they would not understand its meaning or implication? I'm not even sure if it's the authors treating their audience like they have attention deficit, or if the authors are hyperactive themselves and keep jumping from one topic to another, occasionally forgetting a plot promise or two along the way. It is a trend I encounter more and more, and I don't like what it suggests. That is, everything is made in such a haste that it forgets to be wholesome. It needs to be released now, not when it's ready. Serially manufactured stories don't tend to be the best ones. Where is the playfulness, teasing, suspension, or where is a motif, theme to revolve around and come back to? If doubt was supposed to be a motif, it should have been introduced way earlier, because it doesn't matter now. Everything is already in motion, and there is no coming back. Continuing, brothers arrive at the wall, which looks pretty menacing, just like the real one. Daniel makes a hole in it, thanks Sean for taking him there, and gets shot.
Daniel.
Now, I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of vigilantes patrolling around the wall, and I have no doubt they're assholes, every single one of them. But shooting a 10-year-old kid is pretty hardcore even for these people. Not unseen, mind you, but I just can't shake the feeling that this is the only way to temporarily get rid of Daniel's powers. Shooting him so he conveniently passes out. I don't really have a problem with that, as much as with the fact that once again Sean meets unhinged racists who are willing to shoot kids on sight without even confirming who they are first. I linked a great article about the violence of vigilantes below. Obviously, I don't have experience of living the life of Mexican miner in the USA, but according to this game, they are lucky to be alive. Cops shoot them, vigilantes shoot them, chats make them sing and beat them up. Even local heroes cuff them to radiators and kick them in the teeth. Like Jesus, these people can't catch a break. I'm not trying to be condescending towards the US minorities, but to the game's story, because I just find it unpleasant to go from dilemmas of well-written characters with real motivation and background to something like this. Bam, rednecks shooting kids. For example, we know a lot about David's character, and it is interesting to listen to him talk and see his perspective on life. Find out how he ended up in a way. And I was kinda curious about how he changed to be able to talk to Chloe, and how she changed to be able to accept him in her life. I was curious about Karen, and what were her plans for the future, and for her sons. Was she ready to be close to them, play a role in their life, or would she prefer if she had more space after their honeymoon period? Instead, we get attempted murder on a kid, and once again, it comes out of nowhere, just like Chad. Just a villain appearing out of thin air. I wonder what is the name for such a trope? Diabolus ex machina? Or Diabolus ex nihilo? Anyway, vigilantes tie up Sean, only to be apprehended by the police themselves. Sean is recognized as a wanted fugitive, arrested, and taken to custody. There wasn't even an illusion of interactivity in this part. I could only walk few steps toward the wall, and that was it. Then the game decided the scene was over and moved my character to a different one. The next morning, Sean wakes up in a cell at the police station. A lot of scenes start with Sean waking up. I understand it is a natural start, but it gets a little tiring. Look at episode 1, where after sleeping in the woods, we find ourselves on the road. We don't have to wake up and pack our stuff, pick our 5 plums as we say, but we start on the road already. Sean is in a cell with the Mexican couple and the familiar couple of vigilantes in the cell next to them. They don't have much to say, but you can chat with the Mexican couple. This is their 3rd time trying to illegally cross the border to the US, and from what they say, basically for the purpose of birth tourism. That is not a good plan, by the way. They would still get deported, even though their child would technically be US citizen. But that would also mean he would be subject to US taxation once he reached adulthood, even if he never lived there. It is not a good plan to just go to United States illegally, despite the obvious issues in obtaining citizenship through proper channels. For example, did you know some legal immigrants wait for a green card for decades? Did you know that children of temporary workers wait in line for permanent residency with their parents, but get kicked out of the waiting line on their 21st birthday? Link below, very interesting read. The current administration basically blocks any reasonable requests for legal immigration, and half of the US population has strongly negative stance towards illegal immigrants. I am afraid the times just don't favor them, and I'm not sure what to think about their attempts either. I understand that this couple may have a hard time in Mexico. Nevertheless, it doesn't shed the best light at them when the first act they do on the US soil is cross the border illegally. It is simply a pitiful fact that they are not welcome, they are not wanted. Sean himself can mention that the US is not the paradise they are looking for. Is it the best environment to bring their child to? If the official channel for immigration is broken, is it ethical to try and migrate illegally? Will it expose the flaws of the current system? Will it serve as a mirror to societal tendencies among the people of the United States, thus helping to change that system, making present-day illegal attempts valuable for the future green card and citizenship applicants? The game here raises interesting set of questions, many more I haven't voiced, and I believe no one in their right mind can say they have all the answers right now. But to get back to the game itself, this scene illustrates nicely why some people feel this game makes heavy-handed political commentary. Why? Compare characters in Cell 1 to those in Cell 2. I have stated my opinion on vigilantes protecting the US border, so while I have no issues believing Luke and Madison may be real people, it is the portrayal of their characters in comparison to others which makes them feel dull, single-dimensional, harboring all the negative human traits. It doesn't make for interesting gameplay, because you, as the player, cannot possibly side with them. They are such bad people that no valid argument they could possibly make, and they don't, could be taken seriously. There is no dilemma, no drama, no decision to be made, a circumstance to be weighed, moral to be challenged. Even people who are against illegal immigration may have pretty hard time finding any sympathy for Luke and Madison, not to mention siding with them. Again, Hank's temper example. Make the waters muddier, just as they often are in real life. Compare this to decisions from Life is Strange 1, and look at statistics of players' choices in them. Almost 50-50 to kill not kill Jefferson, 40-60 Warren beating up Nathan or not, 50-50 stealing handicapped money, 50-50 shooting Frank, 50-50 saving Chloe or Arcadia Bay. That is beautiful. Alright, moving on. Sean gets taken to the interrogation room. Fun bit. While he waits, he overhears Madison yelling she wants out of a jail and that she's sovereign citizen. Search YouTube for clips of sovereign citizens and cops. Hilarity guaranteed. Anyway, Sean gets questioned by Officer Campbell, and answers you give him aren't important. Is the game really trying to hammer in the point that nothing Sean says or does can change his fate? Or is it an attempt to make the game more streamlined? We have reached our last dialogue in the game, and I just feel like there weren't a whole lot of my actions to influence my fate. The main thing is how other characters perceive Sean and Daniel. Every character has a preconceived notion, and you can do nothing to change it. They either consider you vermin, or they like you without you doing anything. A good example of latter is Cassidy, who simply likes the city boy Sean seemingly for no reason. Sean didn't do anything to deserve it. Couldn't do is the point. But you have probably heard me lamenting that enough in episode 3. The opposite being Hank's temper. Wasn't my suggestion about him in episode 1 at least a little bit intriguing? It presents different emotional outcomes based on players' actions, and I feel like that is what Life is Strange games should be about. Even if you cannot directly influence the outcome of events, your participation in that outcome matters a lot. Compared to the first game, where the inherent part of gameplay was trying every possible solution, testing the outcome, and then choosing what you like the best. Here, you have some faint illusion of choice, but at this point, I just didn't care. The issue is not that this particular dialogue doesn't have any payoff, it is that most of them don't. I could understand if it was the case only with some of the antagonistic characters, who simply wouldn't listen to anything you say, but not everyone, everywhere. Let's head toward the finish.
Sean!
Daniel breaks Sean out and they leave the police station. At this point, Daniel's personality has already been shaped, for the entire episode for that matter, so it is quite interesting to observe his reactions while he is wreaking havoc at the police station and toward vigilantes in the next cell. After getting out, Sean and Daniel drive towards the border. Nitpick would be, why to drive toward the border crossing on a road? It seems fairly obvious that it would be guarded, and we know Karen's car can drive through the desert, and that Daniel can break the wall anywhere he wants. But that way, we wouldn't get our last dramatic scene. After encountering a strong police force guarding the border, we get to make our last decision. And that's it. That's the end of the game. Should I mention different outcomes? Fine. I have few hopefully interesting observations regarding the different endings of the game. 1. No matter how Daniel makes it to Mexico, he becomes criminal. That confirms my theory that Sean's entire plan wasn't very good. If Sean did absolutely nothing at the beginning of the game, Daniel would be traumatized by his father's death, which is not something we could avoid anyway, but ultimately would grow up just fine. Instead, Sean's actions got us, players, into a situation where Sean had to escape the country to avoid prison. The game never gave us the opportunity to leave Daniel behind, with good intention or bad, so while I do consider different outcomes interesting, they are not very well telegraphed and foreshadowed to the player. For example, no matter what, when Daniel breaks the wall, before being shot, he states, "Thanks for taking me down here, Sean, and I cannot wait to go swimming in the ocean." That telegraphed to me that he was ready to go to Mexico and was genuinely happy about it. It seems strange that he changes his mind one day later, especially after being shot by American rednecks and detained by American police. Don't confuse these two. Anyway, to the criminal part. I actually do have a problem with it. The game portrays many characters as racist who consider Sean to be criminal only because he is of Mexican descent, but Sean confirms their beliefs by becoming criminal throughout the progression of the game. And I wonder if anybody ever thought about it during the writing of the story, because it seems like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Systemic racism insists Mexicans are criminals, and by constantly discriminating against them, turns them into ones. Instead of fighting the prejudice, the player is forced into confirming it. That's kind of ironic, isn't it? In this game, our American-Mexican brothers do become criminals and they do deserve to be punished by law. That is crazy. I could understand the angle where they would be only perceived as such and persecuted for the false belief that they are villains. The belief of uneducated or unenlightened characters like Chad. But it turns out that Chad's and Hank's tempers of this game are correct. If Hank's temper successfully detained Sean at the beginning of the game, he would have prevented fair share of criminal activity, possibly even deaths of Finn, Lisbeth, and many police officers at the end. And since the player couldn't influence many of Sean's unlawful acts, I cannot really hold it against the characters portrayed as racist that they were prejudiced. That is so bizarre. I don't know if that is supposed to be the message of the game, that society will force you into a role against your will and there's nothing you can do about it. In Sean's case, to be a criminal, the only thing you can do is escape society entirely. I would disagree with such a message wholeheartedly. While I do agree some places and communities are horrible for individuals not fitting into them, think gay character Jacob and Christian sect, our society is fairly progressive and most people can find their place. Often not optimal, but such is life. Our environment is often not optimal, but we can fight to change it, often successfully. And while it may be hard, overwhelming, and take decades in real life, this setting of character-based fantasy video game is perfect for it. 2. If Sean makes it to Mexico alone, he's shown to be a happy camper. How? He displayed zero survivability. With no money, no skills, no people skills, with nothing learned, he would probably become a beach bum, and not in a good Finn-like way. Also, what about Daniel's presence makes him turn bad? And what about Daniel's absence makes him good or happy? Is it just less stress from responsibilities? In the same way Karen became a happier person after she gave up family life? Sadly, there is no explanation, neither is this logical conclusion to anything presented in the game. Knowing why and how would offer a satisfying conclusion to the story. 3. When Sean gives up, he gets sent to prison for 15 years. I wish this was changeable. I wish there were subclasses of that ending. I wish there was a non-criminal, non-violent way of going through the game where you could avoid the sentence, or at least a long sentence, or, to the contrary, if you were violent, if you attacked the police officer and shot Lisbeth in episode 4, the problematic episode, Sean would get life in prison. But the player's actions are not reflected, and I think it is a pity. Obviously, you don't know these things before you actually finish the game, but the fact that some of the possible results aren't foreshadowed doesn't make for a satisfying experience. It feels like a step into the unknown, which could be interesting in certain parts of the story, but not in the end. I like when the ending of the story ties in loose ends, when everything fits together. But presented endings either didn't offer any answers, or they raised additional questions. For example, why and how did brothers end up living life of crime in Mexico? What was their plan, if any? How were they not caught by Mexican authorities, especially after the events at the border? And many more. I understand that presented endings aren't supposed to be black and white, good or bad, and that is okay. Although, it is sort of strange, given that every character in the game is either good or bad, and many of the choices are either good or bad. Statistics at the end of episodes reflect that. Overall, it is okay when our characters don't get everything they longed for or needed, if all their wants are not satisfied. But the story development should be satisfying to the player, and in my case, it wasn't. I'm fine with having an ambiguous ending to the story as long as the journey there is fulfilling. Again, we can use direct comparison to Life is Strange 1, where you've got closure from your final decision. Either you sacrificed Chloe and with her your happiness for what you felt was morally right, thus fulfilling your sense of righteousness. You could tell yourself that you did the right thing with great personal sacrifice. Or you saved Chloe, despite the deaths of innocent people of Arcadia Bay, despite the destruction of the entire city, and in spite of every odd, thus fulfilling your sense of triumph over the destiny. Feeling best summarized by few lines from Tenacious D in The Pick of Destiny. We've been through so much shit, deactivated lasers with my dick, now it's time to blow this fucker down. But I didn't get a sense that Sean grew on his journey, that he learned anything about himself, about the world, about raising a child and taking care. He still felt like the featureless character we started with, tabula rasa, empty slate. It could be so satisfying to end up with a character full of features gained on his journey by interaction with other characters, good, bad, and those in between. It seems almost paradoxical that writers weren't afraid to change Sean so much physically, constantly hurting his body, even taking out his eye, but all that left no mark on Sean's personality, social and emotional state, his behavior, and his wisdom. So, here we are, at the end. Overall, Life is Strange 2 felt like writers wanted to tell a story, but players' choices stood in the way of their narration. So they decided to get rid of players' freedoms and his choices, and add meaningless options, so the player would feel somehow included into the story, yet at the same time couldn't change its course. Except, Life is Strange is a game where strong characters should drive the story, or even, character-defining, player-controlled actions are the story. Unfortunately, I often felt like the parts where I could interact with something were actually slowing story progression down instead of pushing it forward. Telling a story just as the author intended is a non-issue in a movie or a book. However, this is a game. It tries to include me into the story somehow, yet because of its structure, its narration, because of how characters are written and the choices I am given, and most importantly, choices I am not given, it seems like it doesn't know how to include me very well, and thus it makes me feel like I am not playing, but playing along.
Spread your arms on the edge of the jagged cliff. I could feel my arms get stiff as I clenched your shoulder.